How would you describe your personality? Are you exacting in your work, organized, thorough? Are you creative, open to new experiences, and curious about things you don't fully understand? Maybe you get frustrated easily. Or perhaps you take a more relaxed approach to life. If you collected all these bits of who you are, your preferences, your values, traits, behaviors, your fears and hopes, your ambitions, and your views of others, what then would this collection of data really be able to tell you? Like, is it possible to look at someone's personality and figure out what films they like? If they'd be down to go to that new Moroccan place down the road? But most importantly for this channel, if you had a sense of someone's personality, could you make a pretty good stab at what their musical preferences might be? Conversely, if you snoop through someone's Spotify or flip through their record collection, could you make an educated guess at what personality traits this person might score highly in? Well, in this video, we're really going to look at what the science says. We'll even delve into some of the proposed solutions to this question. Like, do metalheads see themselves as more independent? Do jazz fans tend to be more laid back? Are fans of pop more extroverted? Or is this all bunk research? Is it pop psychology? Kind of the equivalent of a musical horoscope. So grab a cup of tea or a snack, get comfortable. I'm David Hughes, and welcome to Charcuterie Sound. Today we're tackling music and personality. That was just for the shot. This is extremely strong. The bag's been in here for ages. So I've already actually covered a personality trait that does seem to be pretty tightly connected to musical preference, and I discussed that in my NPC musical preference video. And the personality trait that I discussed in that video is called openness to experience. It's one of the big 5 personality traits that modern research psychologists generally accept as being one of the fundamental dimensions of personality. So ask yourself, do you find yourself open to new things and ideas? Are you open to giving new musical artists or genres a chance? If you're watching this video, you probably are to some extent. If this is the case, you're much more likely to be a jazz fan or a fan of artistic or experimental music. You would also probably score higher in openness to experience, and that has tons of different correlations with many different aspects of your life, including your religiosity, your political affiliations, your opinions about all sorts of stuff. Openness to experience is like a really hard nut to crack, but it's a fascinating rabbit hole. And of course, as you're probably wondering, the other 4 generally accepted personality traits, part of the aforementioned Big 5, are conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism. But as far as openness to experience goes, if you have a strong preference for more conventional music like pop music or country, you might be more reserved when it comes to your openness. It also might take you a little longer to like new things that challenge your usual status quo. But it's not just pop music that's correlated to heightened levels of certain personality traits. Some studies have shown that lovers of classical music tend to be more neurotic than the average listener, and fans of dance music and hip-hop might be more outgoing, having a higher level of extroversion. But it's important to remember that these traits exist on a spectrum, and that we have different levels of each of these traits. But I'd be lying by admission if I didn't reveal that I find some of these studies a little bit problematic. And that's because the orthodoxy, the kind of has-been way of thinking about music and personality, focuses on what I'd probably call record store genres. So kind of the genres that you might see flipping through a record store. Rock, pop, country, R&B, acid jazz. Conversely, studies that have come out more recently, I think have a much more robust approach. Instead of just grouping music into genres, they're grouping them into factors. These are things that can be shared between genres, and individual songs can have different levels of these different factors. And that allows us to be a lot more precise with what we're measuring and what correlations might exist. These factors can be things like mellow, intense, campestral, bass-heavy, sophisticated. That one bothers me a little bit. And of course, not every study is focusing on the same factors. But there does seem to be a growing consensus around Renfrow et al.'s 5-factor model. But this approach, which is much less attached to the baggage of genre, has revealed some pretty interesting trends. For example, bass-heavy music. There have been findings replicated that show that men seem to prefer bass-heavy music more than women, very generally, and that there might even be a connection between a preference for bass-heavy music and antisocial behavior. And the correlation is not perfect. There are different clusters, and of course there are outliers, so Don't be upset if you like bass-heavy music. I like bass-heavy music. Of course, these studies show a correlation, not a causation, and that's very important to keep in mind. You don't have to immediately be driving to the psychiatrist's office, I promise. But another interesting correlation appears when you look at the ability to enjoy music without lyrics. In one study, openness to experience was very closely correlated to the ability to enjoy instrumental music. Just personally, I'd say probably around half, maybe more than half the music I listen to is instrumental music. But I do know a lot of people who would quickly lose focus without vocals, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I'd love to hear in the comments if any of you guys get bored when you're listening to music that doesn't have vocals. But now for something a little bit darker and a little bit more controversial. One particular battle that's going on right now in this area of study is if certain musical factors or genres can be linked to maladaptive personality traits. And if so, which genres or factors have the closest and clearest connection, if there is a connection at all. These maladaptive traits are things like aggressiveness, lack of empathy, hostility, etc. Earlier studies found connections between so-called rebellious music genres like metal, punk, and some forms of hip-hop with these maladaptive traits. And to be fair, many of these studies have been replicated. But recently, this view has come under more scrutiny, especially in regards to the methodologies that some of these earlier studies were using. While newer studies with more robust methodologies sometimes have difficulty reproducing these findings. The interesting thing is that some of these studies have found more robust links between hostility and other genres, such as country or gospel music. But again, you can find correlations all day and have no causal sinew to speak of, which is okay. It's out of the scope of these studies for sure. But also, here's where we can get a little bit critical, I think. Now, if you've been grumbling about how the study of music and personality might be a bit silly and is bound to be flawed from the get-go, this part is for you. Maybe you're also wondering, why should I believe you as a source for this information? And I would say you shouldn't. Engage with the material yourself, read the literature. It goes way beyond what I'd be able to communicate in a small video like this. I just don't have the time. I would love to, but I just don't. That disclaimer out of the way, this body of literature does have its limits, and that's fine. We're still learning. Now, of course, it's not like the researchers don't know this. They've read all the literature. In fact, they have to do a literature review, right, as part of their research study. And these limits are almost always mentioned in the papers themselves. So it's not really a this camp versus that camp. It's more of a, here's the problems that we have and here's how we might fix them kind of thing. But these limits and criticisms, they seem to come in three distinct flavors. The first of these criticisms is the cultural relativity of the results. Basically, are these findings something that we can extrapolate or universalize? Like would a study in preferences for intense music have similar findings in, say, Quebec, Canada versus Cape Town, South Africa? Is it likely that these studies would yield similar results? But we just have to be careful that we're not automatically universalizing. And the second type of criticism that you'll often run into are criticisms of the big five personality traits. And this is such a big issue, it's kind of outside the scope of this channel a little bit. It's a meta psychology problem right now, but I'll try and link to a good video or written research that can communicate these criticisms a little bit better than I probably could. And of course, the third type of criticism that really you run into in all corners of academia is sample sizes. Some of these psychology studies do have pretty limited sample sizes. Others are actually very robust with their sample sizes, but that's the importance of replicating results as well, finding maybe a hint of something interesting and expanding it into a larger study. So while it is a totally appropriate criticism, it's not like a slam dunk takedown. It's really just a call for further funding and study. If you're looking for capital T truths, you're kind of going to be a little bit disappointed, especially with studies involving, messy things like people. So with a lot of these questions, it really does feel like we're just scratching the surface. And I'm excited to see what scholars come up with in the next 10 to 15 years. I think it's going to be a really exciting area of psychology. So many of these studies have been replicated and expanded on, and there is clearly some there. The authors of these studies know that they need to sharpen the pencil a bit. They know further investigation is needed. And that might be an unsatisfying end to some of you, but I really like to do my research. And I think it's a lot better than a list of unvetted facts that aren't really facts. Because you guys are so much smarter than that. I know that because of comments like this, or even ones like this. But that's all for now, guys. I hope you're all having a great week. Please like and subscribe if you want to. It's a big help and I really appreciate it. My next 2 videos are going to be genre overview videos. So one of them I've already picked out, but the second one I'm not sure of yet. So please let me know if there's a genre that you want covered. I will take it very seriously and it might end up in a video. So thanks again. Keep listening and stay curious. I'll see you next time.